Hello everyone, and welcome to the Need for Speed. Today we're going to talk about speed, A, what it is first if you're a newer player, and B, if you're a veteran player, the importance of it, and if you are an expert at the game. Please, as always, provide extra commentary on how speed's effective, when to use it, how to use it, and maybe we can talk about how to get away with slower speeds and what that setup will look like. First, it would be an injustice if we did not talk about how the actual speed mechanic works in the game. I'm going to read straight from the wiki, a little boring, but it will give you the most technical definition, which is what I'm looking for here. Speed determines the priority the hero has over the other characters and the enemies in battle. At the very start of each round of battle, a random number ranging from 1 to 8 is determined for the speed of the character, and it is added to the value that the character has. For example, if everyone had a speed of 10, it would be pure RNG who goes first and who goes last, correct? Because it's 1 to 8, and what they don't tell you is it's a unique 1 to 8. It's not like everyone can roll at 8, I believe. I'm pretty sure it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Don't exactly quote me on that, but I don't think it's like two people can get 8s at the same time. At least I don't think so. Now, why is that important to know? Well, when you're running a speed of 5 against a speed of 10, it's not that you're always going to lose, but statistically, I believe about, 33% of the time, about 37% you'll go before the other person. So if you have a strategy where if you need to go first, it's only going to work about 37% of the time. Not exactly too thrilling. So why do we want more speed? To be honest, we don't always need an insanely high speed. There's two ways to look at speed. Speed for setup and speed to go first. And what I mean speed by setup is, let's say just for generic, you have an arbalist and you have an occultist. Let's say you're using the occultist to mark. You're not going to want the arbalist to go first because there's no mark for the arbalist to function, correct? This scenario can actually have both things be true at the same time. You can have the arbalist go before all the enemies, but you have to have that speed order where the occultist goes first. Another big thing that involves speed like that is if you want to do a Holy Lance rotation or a Duelist Advance rotation. So what you can do is get one Crusader or Highwayman considerably lower in speed or higher, however you want to look at it. So let's just say you have Crusader at like 8 speed and one at 4. Statistically, it's much higher that you're going to have the other guy go before the other person, because statistically you're going to have to get some pretty funky speeds for that 4 speed to be chronically outbeating your 8 speed. Not saying it can't happen, I'm just saying that is a possibility. Technically, if you wanted to be safe, like completely safe, you'll obviously get a speed difference of 8 and then you're fine. Even if the other person gets a 1, they would still beat the other person by a value of 1 speed. However, that's really hard to do, and that typically means you're dumpstering someone's speed. You don't necessarily want to do that. Now that we've talked about speed, we need to talk about the importance and the philosophy of it. Higher speed later in the game is essentially what I call preventative. You can have parties that are super slow and heal them and all that stuff, and which we'll talk about near the end of this video. But for the most part, how you get away with parties without strong heals is to increase their speed. And that's because you get first stuns, you get your riposte up first, or you can just critically shot somebody and kill them right away, right? That's why the Grave Robber can be really good. She has a high speed and lunge is such a high damage ability, she can delete someone immediately before they take their turn. Plague Doctor is also a great example of why higher speed works really well. The Plague Doctor can get a couple speed trinkets on her, and she can have right around maybe 10 to 12 speed, which is pretty good, and she can stun the back row, she can do a lot of good DOT. So having her go first rather than at the end of the round when all the enemies have already taken their turns, it's much better for her to go first. Once again, we talked about characters that have slower speeds. Slower doesn't mean that you have to dumpster them. It just means you need them to go maybe 3rd or 4th in your composition. You still probably want them to go before the enemy because obviously you want to kill shot. The only character in the game I could maybe argue you want to go middle of the pack to 3/4 after enemies go is a Vestal or your main source of heals. And that's because if your healer goes first, there's nothing to heal. And here's the tricky part about really high speeds and a pitfall you can kind of fall into. If you go, let's just say all 4 turns before your enemy does, and you fail to kill even like a person, what happens is the computer now gets to use all 4 enemies in a row. Thus, they can focus the same person the whole time. That's actually how you can lose somebody. Because like I said, if your healer goes before anybody else, there's no chance for you to correct that. That's why if you go first in the strategies like that, you need to absolutely have a possibility to stun 1 or 2 people, or have the capabilities of guaranteeing at least a person dies. Because if all of you go and then the enemy gets 4 rounds in a row, that could be the straw that breaks the back, right? That could be 4 attacks all on the same person, 1 unfortunate critical, 1 DOT into a crit, and you know what, whatever have you, the normal stuff there. That's why having higher speed works out really well in champions, because you get to go before the enemies, you get to stun them, control them, and then kill them before they even take a turn, and that's all preventative. Now we're going to talk about reactionary / maintenance. A couple of characters in the game, such as the Leper and Crusader, they're always easy ones to pick on, have pretty dumpster fire speeds compared to champion level stuff, so most likely they almost always go to the middle of the pack to middle lower if you don't do significant speed increase trinkets on them or have really good quirks. And the reason why they're so reactionary is the Crusader and the Leper have pretty good abilities that will allow them to heal, so even though they take a crap ton of attacks and stuff, they still can do their stuns and damage at the end of the turn, killing somebody or stunning up somebody. And then typically in those lineups, what you do is you take a turn or 2 near the end, get your HP back, get your stress back, and you move on. One of my favorite compositions very early in the game, not so much anymore, but it was just an ironclad battleship. It was the Vestal, Jester, Crusader, Leper. I mean, it could survive practically any dungeon, anywhere. It had so much heals, so much stress heals, so much tank ability, and so much HP. But the speeds were really slow until I battle ballad. And then you could bring those slower individuals up, you could get them up and running, which is why the Jester is really great for pretty much the, I don't want to say the bad characters in the game, but the Jester is pretty much a lifesaver for the Leper. Not so much the Crusader. The Crusader is not as bad in terms of accuracy and all that, but the Crusader does love the speed you get from battle ballad as well. Therefore, then you can get into those opportunities where you're, you know what, you're going middle of the road to actually in front of the pack. So after a turn, though your first turn may have been a little slower, your second turn may be considerably better. And then especially by your second turn, you can easily be going middle of the pack as a medium to all 4 of your heroes going for the enemy. And then once you get that speed build up, then you can use those turns to do some maintenance on your heroes. So if you're ever wondering how parties survive without healers, or why you're always just getting outclassed by speed and how to kill stress damage dealers quicker, literally the need for speed is the question. Sometimes you just need to say, screw it, I'm going to get someone to 14, 15 speed, they're going to have my stun, they're going to have my pull, and they're going to allow the rest of my party to function. I would typically not recommend having everybody be a really slow speed. It's okay to maybe have 2, because your first 2 people, if they're good enough, they can either set up for a kill shot or they do kill or stun. As long as you don't have 3 or 4 enemies going in a row, typically you're going to be okay. But you definitely want to either stun or kill somebody with your first initial speed, and then let your slower speed individuals, typically, not always, your heavy damage hitters, or at least your real surefire control. I hope this helped. You can ask a little more about speed. It's a simple mechanic once you understand it, but it's amazing once you realize how much speed dictates fights. Because if you know you're going to go first the next 3 turns, you don't have to be like, ooh, am I going to get to go? Is he going to get to go? And enemies with slower speeds, you can say, I can ignore them for now, so I'm going to stun their higher speed individual first, and then I'm going to move down the line to their slower. That's another way you can look at it as well. And that's why stress damage dealers should always get the first stuns, first critical strikes and all that, because they're almost always going to outspeed the individuals in the front. And then the enemies in the front you can take care of later. If you have good heals, they're typically the more heavy damage dealers, not always, but the first 2 positions typically have your most damage. 3 and 4 typically have the most stress damage. And I always found that stress damage in champion level is so much worse to make up for. And I'll just say this last note before I get off here. Your HP always increases, however your stress pool always stays 200. Now you do get trinkets and skills that can remove more and reduce more, but essentially you can hit affliction probably about 2 to 3 times quicker than you can from the apprentice level. And that is probably one of the hardest things for people to get over, is the apprentice veteran stress damage compared to the champion level stress damage, because the speed goes up, the stress damage goes up, and the dodge goes up. And if you have a couple of slower parties or not great control, those stress damage dealers can rain upon you the whole time, and you can sit there struggling and thinking, how the heck am I ever going to control these guys? So like I said, speed trinkets are amazing. I would highly go for them. So to sum up this video, definitely get at least a person with 2 high speed that can control or burst. Then maybe you can follow up a little slower. If you have all high speed individuals, do be aware of single target fire and maybe bring along 1 good heal, because you may need to replace a lot of HP in 1 turn if you have some unfortunate RNG, or maybe you only kill 1 out of 4, and like I said, in worst case scenario you kill nobody and then 4 abilities get casted. It can happen, but it's very rare. Thank you for watching. I hope this kind of helps you understand speed and the philosophy of it, and why speed tends to be good, but do be aware of that pitfall. Thank you so much.